Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black in conjunction with Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire and the home of African-centered news and information. If you're watching, family, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, and hit the notification bell. As you all know, we're back with part 15 of our groundbreaking Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future. Once again, part 15 of our Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future. And we're looking at Edward Wilmot Blyden, who was considered one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, along with the Trinidadian barrister, Henry Sylvester Williams. So once again, family, hopefully we could have a great show. Happy Pan-African Friday to you all regarding, of course, part 15 of our Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, where we seek to honor and study the life, legacy, and most importantly, the work of Pan-Africans of the past in order to learn how to make a better world for African people in the future. With that being said, family, we want to make sure that we go over today's Black History Fact. And today's Black History Fact took place on this day in 1916, in which Garrett T. Morgan, the inventor of the gas mask, rescued 6 people from a gas-filled tunnel in Cleveland, Ohio. So shout out to the land, to 216. As you all know, everything happens in the good old OHIO. And Mr. Sandman is watching. We're one-upping you again, right? Ohio State all day, every day. So with that said, family, it's going to provide a brief overview of course, of Edward Wilmot Blyden. Many of you may be unaware, but he was an Americo-Liberian. He was an educator, writer, diplomat, and politician who was primarily active in West Africa. He was born in the Danish West Indies on August 3rd, 1832. Ironically, he shares a birthday with my son. And he joined a wave of course, Black immigrants who immigrated from the Americas to, of course, Liberia. Blyden became a teacher for 5 years, and many of his major writings were on Pan-Africanism, and he was an influential throughout West Africa. And his ideas went on to influence the likes of Marcus Garvey, George Patmore, and of course, Kwame Nkrumah. However, with that said, there are some critiques of Blyden that I think if we want to focus on making a better world for African people in the future, we have to look at, right? And I wrote an article on Medium about 2 years ago, titled "Are Classical Pan-Africanists Eurocentric?" And I'm going to put that link in the chat so you all can, of course, check out the article. But one of the things that we found, particularly in terms of not only Blyden, because I don't want to just speak ill of him. I'm not trying to speak ill of him, but we're just critiquing because once again, we want to make a better world for African people in the future, is that Mr. K, appreciate you, brother. Hopefully you could tap in and be part of the conversation. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button, like, share, and subscribe. We find that classical Pan-Africanism, particularly what's known as proto-Pan-Africanism, was situated in a high culture aesthetic, right? So we're talking about, of course, there was a focus on racial uplift, Christian evangelicalism, and European culture indoctrination. So I'm going to give an actual example of that because I think it's important that, we deal with facts and not feelings. So Blyden, considered one of the founding fathers of Pan-Africanism, as I stated before, along with Henry Sylvester Williams, opined in a seminal treatise that I've, of course, read, A Call of Providence to the Descendants of Africa in America. He states, quoting verbatim, that God allowed the enslavement and subjugation of African people so that they may be converted to Christianity. Right? It was his belief that as a result of that, we could then take the Christian indoctrination and the European cultural indoctrination and then return to the continent and help develop our brothers and sisters there. This, of course, is extremely problematic, and of course reeks of the miseducation that was preeminent during that time for people of African descent and even brothers and sisters on the continent. right? Because, Kwame Nkrumah talked about the missionary schools were of course, just European indoctrination labs, right? So a couple things to consider there. So when we talk about making a better world for African people, particularly from an educational frame of reference, because that's really the wheelhouse, that was his wheelhouse. These are things that we need to be cognizant of, that we're not promoting the miseducation machine. Ashe, Black Power. So once again, taking nothing from him, he did real work in a real way, right? He was what a forebearer of one of Marcus Garvey. We do know that each generation after Paul Kufi, we saw waves of course, African Americans and people of African descent seeking to return home. Of course, Blyden was able to return home due to the help of the American Colonization Society. Many people argue that many people who are, I put it this way, do not have a working knowledge of Pan-Africanism have argued that the American Colonization Society, in conjunction with the government, was the one that was promoting Pan-Africanism, this concept of Black people repatriating. However, that is not true. The reason why the American government was in support of the American Colonization Society and having Black people repatriate was because having free Blacks live in proximity or community with enslaved Blacks undermine the institution of slavery and will lead those to believe that they too could be free at some point. So something to consider. Once again, this is something I learned when I was in an undergraduate. So we're talking about not only knowing the history, brothers and sisters, but also having a correct and accurate understanding of that history. Okay, so we got a comment here from Mr. K. Yeah, basically some of those founding fathers of Pan-Africanism in the 1800s are complicated people, thus had contradictions. Absolutely, complicated is the ideal word. And I would argue respectfully, right, that these contradictions, the complications that they had, were a result, of course, of the miseducation that they had received, right? And so we, of course, are at a space where we know more, and as a result, we're able to do better. We know better, we do better, and we do not promote those type of, we really you could call anti-African, self-loathing concepts and ideas regarding who we are, and we can have a more of an African-centered approach to how do we solve the problems that we find globally in our communities, particularly when it comes to education. So family, I'm going to put the link in the chat. As you all know, the link is always in the description. Tap in, be part of the conversation. We're discussing one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, Edward Wilmot Blyden. And this is part 15 of our groundbreaking Pan-African leadership series, where we're going to be chronicling the life, legacies, and most importantly, the work of over 200 Pan-Africanists. So tap in, family, be part of the conversation. We'd love to hear from you all in terms of what can we learn from Blyden, good or bad, that we can use to make the world better for African people today. So once again, family, tap in. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Make sure you're a blessing to the show. You can always be a blessing via, of course, Cash App. You can always be a blessing via Venmo, and of course, the Super Chats. Dr. John Henry Clark did say Africans have always been politically naive. Well, I would argue a lot of that is socialization. I think even if you look here in the States, I mean, I think this is a global issue that we find that our people are really socialized to be politically naive. I'm speculating here, but Mr. K, I would presume that you are African in the diaspora. And if you kind of think back, you could really make that argument that we're socialized to be politically naive, right? And I think that plays a role in some of the issues that we find today as well. So once again, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Once again, if you want to be part of the conversation, family, you do not have to cam up. Keyword, you do not have to cam up to be part of the conversation. And you can use a pseudonym. I understand for many people, they want to maintain a sense of privacy, anonymity, and of course, they do not want to make comments in a public forum in which their identity has been revealed that may, of course, challenge or threaten one's livelihood. So we understand that 100%. We are not opposed to anyone, of course, protecting their identity by using a pseudonym and not camming up. But the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. And we're discussing, of course, part 15 of our Pan-African Leadership Series, where we're chronicling the life, legacy, and the work of one Edward Wilmot Blyden, one of the fathers, of course, of Pan-Africanism, born in the Danish West Indies, later migrating to Liberia, and then settling, of course, in Sierra Leone. His writings, of course, on Pan-Africanism influenced George Padmore, Marcus Garvey, and one Kwame Nkrumah. And so one of the things that we're looking at in terms of Blyden is, unfortunately, his Eurocentric, right? Eurocentric disposition, and of course his focus. A lot of the focus in terms of repatriation was Christian missionary work. So this belief really taken on. We could talk about the imperialistic machinations of the Christian faith, and of course seeking to, of course, indoctrinate brothers and sisters on the continent with an alien faith. And so this is an issue that many would argue we still face today, right, in terms of the community. So once again, family, tap in, be part of course, the conversation. Love to hear from you all. This is part 15, keyword family, part 15 of our Pan-African leadership series, past, present, and future. And one of the benefits of this series is it gives us a chance to really unpack the history of the ideology and, of course, movement, but also to dispel many of the misnomers regarding Pan-Africanism, particularly one of the more prominent concepts and ideas regarding some of the critiques of Pan-Africanism is the concept and idea that it's one-sided, right? We know that's not true. I just saw on Twitter this morning someone making the argument that have African Americans or Black Americans, I like to use the term African Americans, have African Americans outgrown Pan-Africanism, right? And oftentimes, family, I go into these spaces and I remain inconspicuous, right? I don't say anything and I just listen. And it's just extremely troubling. Individuals tend to have a lack of understanding of what Pan-Africanism is, and at the same time tend to be militantly integrationist in nature. So I think that's something that we see as an outgrowth, of course, of some of the repudiation of Pan-Africanism. And it's this militant repudiation of course, anything that's African, but also this aggressive approach of trying to integrate into American society, even willing to even take on and even promote concepts and ideas that are antithetical to our mere existence. So we're talking about white nationalist thought and xenophobia. So let's see here, Mr. K, once again. I suggest apply the SWOT analysis approach of our historical figures. That way you identify the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful to truly learn and evaluate the past. And I've heard of SWOT analysis before. Let's see if I can pull that up again. SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I would agree 100%. Absolutely. And I think that's how we move forward, where we're able to take the good, you said the good, look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful, and truly learn and evaluate from the past. Absolutely. Great point, Mr. K. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, of course, we're doing this leadership series, because it allows us to engage in a SWOT analysis of what did he do well, what did he do poorly, what do we want to, of course, build on and try to scale, and what we look to, of course, remove ourselves from. So once again, family, tap in, be part of the conversation. I hope you all are having a great Pan-African Friday morning. Many of you may still be waking up if you're on the West Coast, if you're on the East Coast, it is past noon. But once again, family, I think it's important that we have these type of dialogues, but also I think it's extremely important that we have this leadership series so that we can engage with the history of an ideology and movement that, to be quite honest with you all, family, is under attack. So tap in, be part of the conversation. You're watching, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, in conjunction with Bequaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African-centered news and information. And we're here to discuss, of course, the life, legacy, and most importantly, the work of Edward Wilmot Blyden, one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, along with Henry Sylvester Williams, and he will come much later in our leadership series. And one of the critiques people would have of Henry Sylvester Williams is that, of course, he was married to a non-African woman. Blyden, on the other hand, married into a prominent Liberian family, right? So that is a conversation that could be had, but we've had that conversation before. And so as a result, family, would love to hear from you all in terms of if you are knowledgeable of Blyden. So one thing we can do, family, if you're watching, put a 1 in the chat if you are knowledgeable, if you are aware of who Edward Wilmot Blyden is, and put a 2 in the chat if you are not aware of who Edward Wilmot Blyden is. So once again, put a 1 in the chat if you are aware of who he is, put a 2 in the chat if you are not aware of who Edward Wilmot Blyden is. So I recommend this book, Ethiopianism, The Forgotten Movement by Danny Thompson. It's a very insight book about Ethiopianism and the predecessor of Pan-Africanism. Yes, I am familiar with the concept of Ethiopianism, not familiar with the book, but you be coming with some bangers, Brother K. That's why I appreciate you always tapping in, because you come with bangers, and I definitely appreciate that. And that's what we want. We want to create a community where individuals, of course, are intellectually incisive and knowledgeable, that when we come together, we can actually formulate perspective proposals that can benefit our community, right? We don't want this being a space where we're just bloviating. I know I did a live once with a dual live with Dynast, and there was a brother on there. We were discussing the issue of aid being pulled, of course, from South Africa, and that aid was 17% of the annual budget. One of the conversations we had was there were sisters and brothers and children who now were unable to afford medicine, right? One of the issues at hand was coming up with some solutions. So anyone who was watching, who was a member of, who was an elected official in South Africa, what were some solutions that we, of course, as concerned members of the African diaspora, of the world, that global African community, to address that shortfall in medication, we were able to come up with that. However, one of the issues that was an issue of concern with someone. So, well, that's not a serious issue. There's an individual that just wanted to bloviate, just wanted to talk, right? And I said, this isn't a space for that. We have actual brothers and sisters, boots on the ground, who, as a result, have a medical shortfall. And we want to make sure that we're cognizant of that, and that if we're proposing solutions, they're tangible, realistic, so that there's someone in a position of power that can, keyword, that can address the needs of the people in South Africa. So, so Snapshot, you said you aren't aware. Can we get some bullet points and paper for the SWOT analysis? You know, that I think that is something that we can start doing, particularly during our Pan-African Leadership Series. Yes, I think we could do that. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? I think that is possible. Yeah, another critique of Blyden was that he argued, so even though he was a Christian, he promoted Christian evangelicalism. He later got involved in Islam and said that Islam was more African than Christianity. So obviously, this is an example of him not having a thorough knowledge or understanding of Abrahamic religions, right? And how anti-African they are. But that's neither here nor there. But I think that would be an example that we will put in terms of the SWOT analysis. That was a weakness of Blyden's leadership as a Pan-Africanist, that he was not aware, of course, of the role of anti-Blackness in Abrahamic religions, and the fact that Abrahamic religions oftentimes were the progenitors of anti-Black racism throughout the known world. So something to consider here. All right, Mr. Sandman, I understand. You said 2. Here are some, more bangers: Rising Wind, Black Americans in U.S. Foreign Policy, 1935 to 1960, In Search for Power, African Americans in the Era of Decolonization, both by Brenda Gay Plummer. So if I remember correctly, I think I've heard of Black America, In Search for Power. Was this a process that discusses African American repatriation to the continent? So I hope you can respond. But if I remember correctly, I think that book was mentioned. That was an example where it discusses African American repatriation to the continent. So please let me know. I'm going to look it up myself. In Search of Power. All right. And family, tap in, be part of the conversation. The era of decolonization. Okay. To intertwine, yes, highlights the intertwined relationship between African American civil rights movement and the decolonization movements in Africa, highlighting how these two struggles for liberation influenced and shaped each other. Wow. The book explores how African Americans drew inspiration and strength from the newly independent African nations and how, in turn, African leaders and interests engaged with the American civil rights struggle. It truly is a banger. You're absolutely right. And of course, and this speaks to one of the benefits and gifts of Pan-Africanism, and shows, of course, once again, that was not been one-sided. So, Mr. K, I got to ask the question: what is your background? Because, like I said, you're putting me onto some literature that I'm not even aware of. So, got to know, what is your background, brother? What is your background? Love to hear from you. Tap in, be part of the conversation. You're watching, of course. Both these books are must reads, back to back. Overstood. So once again, what is your background? What do you do? Did you major in Black Studies or Black History? Because you seem to be well versed, of course, in the literature. Well versed in the literature. Also, anyone else, once again, put a 1 in the chat if you're familiar, if you're not aware of who Edward Wilmot Blyden is, and put a 2 in the chat if you are not. Put a 2 in the chat if you are not, and put a 1 in the chat if you are. Would love to hear from you all regarding, of course, who is one individual who's considered one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, Edward Wilmot Blyden. And we're here to discuss, as brother Mr. K said, a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the life, legacy, and work of one Edward Wilmot Blyden. So we're applying a SWOT analysis, thanks to our brother, regarding our Pan-African Leadership series. So that is something I'm going to look to do moving forward, is that I put in the actual description a SWOT analysis of said leader in terms of their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and of course, threats. Okay, well, you can't go wrong there being a history buff. You also can't go wrong being a student of one John Henry Clark. So truly give thanks. Absolutely. Truly give thanks. So yeah, we will start doing a SWOT analysis of our Pan-African Leadership series. But see, this is the benefit when you have brothers and sisters who are tapping in, who are engaged, who are intellectually incisive, intellectually curious. It can help you grow, not only personally, but also professionally and even intellectually, right? If I was in a situation where I simply wanted sycophants, we wouldn't be doing a SWOT analysis, right? If in fact, if that was the case, we wouldn't have a Pan-African Leadership series. We wouldn't be actually engaging with actual scholars in different fields and doing interviews with them. I think if I remember correctly, but the snapshot was the one that said, hey, we would like to see you do interviews with brothers and sisters who, of course, are your contemporaries, right, in the academy. So giving thanks for that, family, truly giving thanks for that. But yeah, we're talking, once again, Edward Wilmot Blyden. And one of the things he talked about, of course, was the African personality and the uniqueness, of course, of the African race. Many argue that his book became extremely controversial. Many argue that they didn't believe that a Black person had written it, right? His promotion of Islam was disputed. And of course, he did believe, of course, in Ethiopianism, that African Americans could return to Africa and help in the rebuilding of the continent. However, he also was a supporter and advocate of Zionism, right? And he viewed Zionism in a manner, this is something that Black people should emulate in terms of returning to the African continent. Have you heard about the latest Tariq Nasheed? He now claims that Pan-Africanism was financed by the CIA. Oh my God. No, I wasn't aware of that. Please, if you could put that, send that to me, Tariq Nasheed. Wow. Wow. see here. Yes, I'm looking now. It's true. Tariq Nasheed has publicly stated his view that Pan-Africanism has been compromised by the CIA. It's important to note that this is a controversy, and there's a wider discussion about CIA influence in Africa, particularly the Cold War. So let's highlight that CIA too. Yeah, so this is one of the things that he does. And when I did my critique of 19 Keys, someone mentioned in the comment that he seems to not have an understanding, not be able to differentiate between the CIA seeking to infiltrate Pan-Africanist organizations and the CIA creating Pan-Africanism, right? Because we know that irrespective if you were Pan-Africanist, if you were integrationist, if you were doing something that they believed was a threat to their hegemony, they were going to attack you. They were going to try to infiltrate, and they were going to seek to disrupt. That is a reality, irrespective of what your ideology was. It doesn't matter if you were socialist. We could talk about A. Philip Randolph, the Brotherhood of Simcoe Quarters and Mays. We could talk about the African Blood Brotherhood with Cyril Briggs. You could talk about the UNIA. You could talk about SCLC, SNCC, CORE, NAACP. If you were engaging in work that they believed would disrupt their hegemony, they would attack you. But Brother Kevin, this is one of the issues that we have nowadays is that, and I always talk about the enemies of African people, internal and external, but this is one of the issues that we have, right? You talked about being a history buff. We know snapshot reviews. We know even Mr. Sandman, you all are individuals who are intellectually curious, right? Most individuals, unfortunately, aren't. We can argue the part of that's a socialization here in America. That's part of the rat race of life, where you're working, may not have time to always engage with trying to educate yourself, right? Because you got to put food on the table, clothes on children's back, and make sure you're maintaining a roof over your head. And we know the cost of living is skyrocketing, and then the inflation, the value of the dollar is going down. There are a number of issues that can inhibit or prohibit people from being able to do this type of work. However, to make these type of claims that are just simply averse to facts, right? I mean, it really speaks to why many have argued that this brother may be an agent, right? Because he's knowingly and willingly promoting concepts and ideas that we know are, but I would argue he knows that are averse to facts. The other issue is the fact this is an individual who at one point in his so-called conscious career was actually promoting Pan-Africanism because it was a way for him to make money. So something to consider. You are intelligent and you can understand the difference between CIA infiltration and creation. Yes, I am aware, but many individuals are not. For example, when I did a response or reaction video to 19 Keys Breakfast Club interview, and family, I have reached out to 19 Keys. I've emailed him. I sent him a message on Instagram as well. So hopefully we will hear back from him. We could bring him on the platform, have a one-on-one conversation in real time. They don't seem, many of the individuals who could have a critique of Pan-Africanism seem to be unaware, right? And a lot of that is just based on the fact that they don't know the history of the movement. And so it's easy to then make these type of claims and people then believe, right, that is the case, even though that claim is ahistorical and averse to facts, right? He mentioned that the CIA or the government was funding Black Power program or Black Studies programs on college campuses, completely averse to the facts, right? So you say he's an agent, right? Completely averse to facts, right? I'm familiar with the history of the first Black Studies program in the United States at San Francisco State University. They brought in Nathan Hare, Dr. Nathan Hare, put some respect on his name. He, of course, was married to the powerful sister Julia Hare, Dr. Julia Hare. Of course, they have both transitioned now. He was a sociologist by training, trained sociologist. He became the first chair of the program. 2 years later, they fired him, right? What are we talking about? And of course, the push for Black studies at San Francisco State was a push that we saw throughout the country. Black students being influenced by the Black Power movement, Black Panther Party, Black radical thought, cultural nationalism, said they were demanding on campus across the country that we have classes about our history. That wasn't just something that was taking place in California. A good book that talks about this was the book Fighting for Us. It talks about Black cultural nationalism and, of course, the US organization. And of course, we see the amalgamation of course, the Black student movement, the free speech movement, the anti-Vietnam, anti-war movement. All of these things coalesced on campus at San Francisco State and around the country. And this is how there was a demand for, of course, Black studies came into existence. And as a result of that, then as a result, a derivative of the creation of Black studies programs was what? Black cultural centers, right? And I speak to this because my dissertation was on Black culture centers. So I had to know the history before I was even able to actually interject and address the gap in the literature on Black culture centers. So absolutely, Pan-Africanism is the new boogeyman. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, misinformation out there. And of course, this is a space, with brothers like Mr. K, African Power, Mr. Sandman, and even Snapshot Reviews, where we can push back against this misinformation. Because one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that we're coming up with realistic, proposals, and concepts and ideas to be able to better the lives of our people, particularly the material conditions of our people. Many people who know me and know the work that I do in the community, particularly when I had my nonprofit, I was part of a nonprofit organization that I helped co-create, known as the Coalition of African Unity, the CAU. We focused on professional development, right? And people say, "But why are we doing this? We're doing this Black conscience, Black radical tradition." Absolutely, but what's most important is that for you to have the ability to make a living, to put food in your stomach, clothes on your back, and a roof over your head. It's going to be extremely difficult for you to do any type of work in the terms of racial uplift if you can't care for yourself, right? Also, when we look at Malcolm X's Organization of African American Unity, we know Malcolm was taken from us. There was a schism between brothers and sisters in the community, brothers and sisters who were in college in terms of the organization. And as a result, the brothers and sisters who are university educated didn't want any beef. They allowed the brothers and sisters in the community to run the organization. And the organization, of course, ended up devolving, right? Because they simply didn't have the skill set to run an organization, right? So it's important that we develop skills and the necessary, not only for our own economic endeavors, right? So that we can have a livelihood, but also so that we are able to actually create independent organizations, or what some people call parallel organization institutions, for our people in our community. So if we want to have a grocery store, a rec center, a hospital, a bank, it takes actual professional skills to be able to run those institutions. Ashe, Black Power. And so that's part of the work that I do, is, of course, professional development from an African-centered frame of reference. So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Please tap in and be part of the conversation. We'd love to hear from you all. Once again, we're doing a SWOT analysis, thanks to Mr. K, regarding the life, legacy, and most importantly, the work of Edward Wilmot Blyden, one of the fathers, of course, of Pan-Africanism, along with Henry Sylvester Williams. Let's see here. He confirmed he was approached by the FBI to talk rubbish about Africans for money, and that they pay good for anyone interested. I don't understand why people didn't understand the game of it. Wait. So African Power, is it possible that you could tap in? Once again, you don't have to cam up, but I would love to hear this from you. If you could cam up, I'm gonna put the link in the description, in the chat once again. If you could just, you don't have to cam up, but if you could tap in and really break this down for me, it would be greatly appreciated. Once again, you don't have to cam up. Let's see, another banger, Seeing Red, Federal Campaigns Against Black Militancy by Theodore Cornwell Jr. It highlights how the intelligence agencies, pre-CIA, even outside the FBI, in the Cold War, of course, against Black militancy, overstood. So yeah, African Power, you could tap in. You don't have to cam up. You could continue to use the pseudonym. But if I am following what you've said correctly, you are stating, but this is a presumption, that Tariq Nasheed has openly stated he was approached by the FBI to speak ill of African people for monetary gain. If that is the case, brother, that is a bold declaration, but I hope you could tap in and substantiate that allegation. Once again, family, you're watching LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black in conjunction with Bequalon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African-centered news and information. Make sure you be a blessing to the show. You make sure you can hit us on Cash App at Lumumba Speaks, at Venmo at B Lumumba, and of course, you can always hit the super chat. So once again, family, hope to hear from you all. African Power, definitely want to hear from you all. Mr. K, I always appreciate you dropping bangers, of course, in the chat. Hopefully one day we can get you to tap in and actually be part of the conversation. But once again, yeah, African Power, please, if you could spare a moment, I will be with you next time, but I still always repent. Okay, you said next time. Appreciate it. Well, family, listen, if no one taps in, we're going to end up, logging off sooner rather than later. But once again, family, SWOT analysis, we will start doing a SWOT analysis regarding our Pan-African Leadership Series. And our next video show on our Pan-African Leadership Series will be Holly Q. Brown. Many people may be unaware who Holly Q. Brown is, so make sure you look her up. But as you know, once again, Mr. Sandman, she did her work. She made her bones in Ohio. She's from Pittsburgh, by the way. But she, did her work in Ohio. As Cameron said, we get it in Ohio, right? So once again, family, tap in and be part of the conversation. If not, we will, of course, tap out. But definitely appreciate everyone tapping in, being part of the conversation as we went over, of course, part 15 of our groundbreaking Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, where we chronicle the life, legacy, and most importantly, the work of great Pan-Africanists of the past in order to learn how to be a great Pan-Africanist in the future. So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in, be part of the conversation. Hope to hear from you all this Friday. Happy Pan-African Friday. Once again, family, if you aren't aware, in terms of today's Black History fact, is that Garrett Morgan, the inventor of the gas mask, saved the lives of 6 people in a smoke-filled tunnel in Cleveland on this day in 1916. So we're talking about 109 years ago in Cleveland, Ohio. Garrett Morgan was putting in work, of course, in the great state of Ohio, in the city of Cleveland. Shout out to the 216, right? The land. Ohio has some great Americans. I meant that, but they can't play football. That is cap. Right. And I knew Mr. Sandman was going to try to tap in at some point and put some hate on things. But if we can't play football very well, then you explain this to me. You explain to me why we were the last state standing, right? You explain to me how and why in the past, in this century, we've won 3 national championships and Penn State has won none. You tell me why in this century, only one team wins national championships in The Ohio State University, and that is what? The Alabama Crimson Tide. So once again, I would respectfully, or maybe not so respectfully, disagree with your assertion that we do not play football well, because once again, as it states on the cover of Sports Illustrated, Ohio State is the last state standing. Ashe, Black Power. I know that's right. And I could really root for the boys because they're getting paid now. They're being paid for their labor. All right. Keep up good work. And every liberation, only the great ones will be in a fight. Pan-Africanism is not for everyone. I would agree. And one of the things there was a brother that came on probably last week, and he asked a question. Well, there are brothers and sisters on the continent who are opposed to what Brother Ibrahim Traoré is doing in terms of the Sahel Alliance, with Burkina Faso, the other nation states in the Sahel? Are we supposed to align with them? And I said, no, part of Pan-Africanism is about aligning and working with individuals who advocate for what the Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion. So that we're not telling you to align yourself with what Candace Owens or a number of other Black conservatives who are antithetical to Black empowerment, right? It's about aligning yourself with individuals who are for progression of African people, irrespective of one's, of course, nationality. So half that Ohio State roster is in Pennsylvania. We bring in our Pennsylvania Sons home in 2025. That's cute, but that is not the case whatsoever. Are you familiar with OG Pan-Africanist Obi Tashaka? He did a great lecture on the life and legacy of Wilmot Blyden. I am not familiar with him. I think I've heard the name before, but I'm not very familiar, of course, with Obi Tashaka, but I will look him up. That's why we got to get you to be part of the conversation, brother, because you're always dropping jewels. And I think the audience would love to hear from you. So, once again, family, I appreciate everyone for tapping in, being part of the conversation, if not on the live, but also in the chat. Once again, this was part 15 of our groundbreaking Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, where we chronicle the life, legacy, and work of great Pan-Africans of the past in order to make a better world for African people in the future. He has a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to. Okay, very good. Yeah, I see it right now. I'm going to do that right now. Well, no, actually, no, this is San Francisco Library. It's not him. I will find it. I think I just found it. Very good. Wow. Okay. Very good. So, well, that's a good question. Why didn't he change his name when he got to? Well, I don't know. Sometimes individuals do that. Sometimes they don't. But I think what is most important is that one engages in the work, right? But I would make the presumption that he didn't do that because of his view of Christian missionaryism, Christian evangelicalism, that what was most important was to be a Christian rather than seeking to ingratiate oneself from an African-centered cultural frame of reference, right? And that was something that was very prominent during that time due to, once again, the miseducation that most of our brothers and sisters received as a result of being, once again, miseducated in the Western world. So just something to consider there. Something to consider there. Great question, though, but Mr. Sandman. Yes, I just subscribed to a show, and I will, of course, I'm going to reach out as well. I'm going to reach out to him. Thank you very much for that. Very much for that. All right, family. All right. Any last thoughts on Edward Wilmot Blyden? Mr. K, you have a working knowledge of the life, legacy, and work of Mr. Blyden. If you could provide a SWOT analysis of Blyden, what would it be? And you could share that in the chat. Then, of course, I could share it with the audience. And then, of course, we would call it a show. But if you could, of course, provide a SWOT analysis of Blyden extemporaneously, what would it be? And then, of course, we will call it a show. Definitely appreciate everyone for tapping in and being part of the conversation. You're watching, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black in conjunction with Bequalon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African-centered news and information. Once again, family, and we're asking Mr. K, who I would argue is another one of our resident historians here at, of course, Lumumba Speaks and Bequalon Network, right, along with Brother Dwayne Omawale. So I'm gonna give you that title, brother. If you could provide extemporaneously a SWOT analysis, in your opinion, of the life, legacy, and work of Edward Wilmot Blyden, what would it be? What would it be? Then we will, of course, close out. We will close out. All right. So hopefully you can provide that, and then we will close out. We'll be good to go. But yes, our next show next Friday, part 16 of our Pan-African Leadership Series, we will be honoring the life, legacy, and work of Hallie Q. Brown, who, of course, was instrumental, a pillar of the Wilberforce University community. As I said, she was from Pittsburgh, but she made her bones, right, in the great state of Ohio. Well, that's typically the case if someone is from Pennsylvania. Yes, and that is true, Mr. Sandman. Yes, he made that argument. Yes, what we tend to find. But I mean, you could push back against that in some ways as well. I mean, we talk about in terms of the prohibition regarding alcohol, right? We know that alcohol was used not only in traditional African societies in terms of libation, but also in the weddings as well. So, like I said, there's a give and take there. Okay, no problem. I understand that you say it's a bit difficult to do that at the top of your head. That's why I say extemporaneously or in the comment section. But once again, family, I definitely appreciate everyone for tapping in. And as I said before, our next Pan-African Leadership Series, part 16, will be on Hallie Q. Brown. Hallie Q. Brown, who, of course, was, if I remember correctly, born in Pittsburgh, but she made her bones in Ohio. In a reality situation, if anyone from the Keystone Commonwealth, because Pennsylvania really isn't a state, wants to be something in life, they have to get it in Ohio, right? As Cameron said. So Mr. Sandman, one day he's going to migrate to the great state of Ohio because he's going to want to be great, right? And he knows to do that. He has to leave, of course, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we're going to make sure that we prevent Penn State from winning the Big Ten this year, as we always do. We've beaten Penn State 8 straight years. That's right, family. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7, but 8 straight years. And we're going to make sure that, once again, this season, after this season, that we are the last state standing. And many people will say, well, why are you mentioning this? We're talking about Pan-Africanism, because I always have to make sure I throw a shot at my brother, Mr. Sandman, right? Friendly football banter. But until next time, family, y'all know what to do. Make sure you always, always, always bet on Black. Peace and Pan-Africanism. Happy Pan-African Friday. Until next time, family, y'all know what to do. Peace. Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you.